boy. Good crowd, good crowd. We don't usually try to wander out in the pitch black. That didn't go well.
But love is kind of like wandering in pitch black.
Teresa's
gonna be like really
saving our asses
dark.
already.
I hope a lot of people are here on dates and just ready to have a romantic conversation. But I should say, I'm Jack. I'm the editor-in-chief of Cracked, and joining me on stage, we have the writer and star of many a Cracked video, the co-host of the Kurt Vonneguy's podcast, and my occasional co-host on this podcast, Mr. Michael Swain.
Hello, everyone.
Next to him is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, Sex at Dawn. He also writes for Psychology Today and the Huffington Post, and hosts a podcast called
Tangentially Speaking
with Dr. Christopher Ryan. And next to me is a hilarious stand-up who hosts Very Forward, which is a monthly stand-up show. She's also a writer and producer for Cracked. Please welcome Teresa Lee.
What up?
We're going to be talking about concepts of love, sex, and romance as they've evolved over the course of human history and prehistory. Just make sure you remember that these are all people who were probably at least your grandparents' age. So, I mean, if your grandparents, you can just put them in your head if you'd like. But we do tend to edit the sex out of history. I think just for that reason, because it's kind of gross. Like to picture
When you
lots of old
force
people.
necrophilia imagery into it, yeah, it's kind of gross.
Like, for instance, the two history-based adjectives that we have for people who hate sex and are bad at it are Victorian and puritanical, and those are both bullshit.
and Republican.
Yeah. And they are history.
A new contender enters the fray.
That actually brings me to your book a little bit, because there's this other fact that we've covered that in the early days of like Western Europeans coming over and settling in America, there was a huge problem with people like, quote, going savage, like defecting from, their agricultural society, civilization, and like joining native tribes. And that's something that at least got edited out of the history as I learned it. I assumed that, based on my history, that like the natives just like bowed down before our like mastery of. I don't know why I'm identifying with our. I'm Irish. I didn't come over. I wasn't an initial settler. But you have a saying in your book. Remember the Yucatan, the Alamo, I think is how you put it.
Forget the Alamo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it while you're forgetting
Right.
it. Yeah, why not? Why not?
Can you describe kind of what you're talking about there?
Well, the Yucatan, the story with the Yucatan is that when the first Spaniards were sort of exploring the coast of the Yucatan, what we call the Yucatan now, they pulled an Indian. The Indians came out on their canoes and they pulled one up on the deck of the boat, and the captain said, what's, ¿Cómo se llama esta tierra? What's the name of this land? And the Indian looked at him and said, Yucatan. And they said, okay, great. It's Yucatan. We now declare this Spanish territory, blah, blah, blah. Then in the 70s, an American graduate student studying linguistics was doing her doctoral research on Mayan dialects, ancient Mayan dialects. And she figured out that Yucatan meant I don't understand you. Yeah, so every spring, American college students go to the I Don't Understand You Peninsula. So, yeah, in the book, we sort of use that as a way to say, remember the Yucatan, forget the Alamo, because the point is we think we understand things, but when you actually dig into the original source material, you find out you actually don't understand it. For example, one of the points we make in the book is Anthropologists will often say, or the sort of the scientific literature says, well, marriage is a human universal. Every society that's ever been studied practices marriage, so now we know marriage is a human universal. But when you actually go and look at the reports written by the anthropologists in the field, you see things like, well, so-and-so moved her hammock next to his, so they're married. Right, there's no exchange of property, there's no expectation of sexual monogamy, there's no expectation of paternal care for children, there's no in-law dinners on Sundays, there's none of that. And yet he says they're married, and then, she moved her hammock back to her mother, near her mother's, well, I guess they're divorced. Well, what the hell does that mean? We call it marriage, that's not marriage.
So you're saying I need to get a hammock?
Get a hammock. Everybody should have a hammock. Yeah.
That's the way to go.
And I believe in the book you refer to that as Flintstoneization, right?
Flintstoneization, yeah.
Sort of the idea that we want to project. I mean, God, it's so human to anthropomorphize anything. Look at Pixar, look at Aesop's fables. But certainly that seems to then have also infiltrated science, right? We want even people from the past to be like we are.
Yeah, we assume that the past, especially the distant past, it was sort of like this, just a little cruder. So we assume there were nuclear families. We assume, this sort of this central organizing principle of a lot of evolutionary psychology is that men have an exchange with women. There's this economic exchange at the heart of male-female human sexual evolution, which is that women trade fidelity for certain things from men. So a woman says, okay, I'll only f*** you in exchange for the meat that you bring back.
This guy knows what we're talking
Protection.
about, right? Yeah.
You. I'm talking to you, who I can't see, by the way.
We can't see you. It's okay. Don't worry.
But I know there's a guy right about there. And so that's assumed to be at the heart of human sexual evolution because the man wants to be sure that any babies are his. Otherwise, why would he provision those babies? Why would he invest in those babies? This assumes a nuclear family. This assumes that a guy can go out, shoot a deer, come home, and share it with his wife and his kids, like some sort of prehistoric suburbia.
Right.
That's not how hunter-gatherer people live at all. So that's politics or economics that has sort of infested the scientific narrative, and people buy it just because they look around at the world and they don't have the imagination or the data in many cases to actually re-envision it in a way that's more accurate and also radically different from the world that we live in.
There's also just a lot of history. If I have to accurately understand all of it, I think there's a natural process of boiling down the narrative into one that you can carry around in your head of what you think history is, and it's almost never accurate. Or we wouldn't have jobs, the three of us, yeah.
So you're saying the Flintstones wasn't accurate, historically?
The live-action film one was, yes.
Right, okay.
But the animated is a crock of shit.
Yeah, so...
Do you know the Flintstones was, sorry to interrupt you, but the Flintstones was the first show to ever have a woman be pregnant and carry her pregnancy to term, have a baby. It's the first character to do that, and also the first characters to sleep, a man and a wife to sleep together in the same bed.
That was hot, you're right.
Yeah.
I think the thing I had always heard is that men are primarily concerned with, their paternity. So, if their wife has a child, they're dead set on making sure that that baby is theirs. And so, some of the hunter-gatherer tribes, you're saying, everybody is having sex with each other, and then the baby is just, belongs to the tribe, kind of. It belongs to many different men. They don't have DNA testing, as far as I know. And so it's there's not that instinct of jealousy. A lot of our culture has that built-in idea of jealousy as part of the currency. And if you start from that sort of atomic part where everybody you don't care really who's the father, then I feel it makes a little bit more sense to me. But I do think that we couldn't have this many people on Earth if we had just never invented agriculture, right? Like when we were hunter-gatherers, our population doubled every 200 years or something?
No, I think it was thousands of years.
Oh, thousands
it was
of years.
very, very slow population growth until the advent of agriculture.
Right.
But there are a bunch of different questions in there. There's the jealousy question. Then there's the is agriculture and civilization inevitable question. As far as jealousy goes, I don't want to misrepresent things. There is jealousy in hunter-gatherers, and men do sometimes fight over women, and in some societies that's the most common trigger of violence. So there can be jealousy even in societies where resources are widely shared. Jealousy, I see jealousy as an expression of insecurity. So in that sense, it's innate. Just most mammals feel insecurity and are afraid of losing something that's important to them. But the way there are societies that downplay jealousy, like many of the ones we talk about in Sex at Dawn, and there are societies that accentuate jealousy and this sort of possessive understanding of relationships. She's my wife. That's my kid. That's my.
Right.
And we get that indoctrination very early. And we're talking about Valentine's Day. Be mine. Like you're third grade, you're getting little be mine hearts. And then mass culture, like. We talk about when a man loves a woman, right? He'll sleep out in the rain if she says that's how it has to be. He'll turn his back on his best friend, or, every breath you take is a love song. Like, what? That's a stalker song. What are we talking about?
That's where I take all my cues from.
Can't
romantic
you see? You belong to me, So there's this, our society encourages that sense. And also because we live in a scarcity-based society, if you lose your lover, you might be alone for a long time, or maybe forever. Right? Because it's not like easily shared, like, oh, she's got a husband, so what? She's sleeping with him and me too. Like, there's not that easy access to sexuality, all of which encourages this very sort of possessive, freaked out, jealous view of things.
You have an interesting quote from someone that civilization is based on blocked sexual energy. Freud, yeah. The idea that, like, because civilization put all these unnatural sort of barriers in the path of people expressing their sexuality, that kind of turned people's energies in other directions. Do you think that's why so many rockets and blimps are all dick shaped and cigars and because Newton
is your dick
died.
Blimp shaped, Jack?
Yeah. Perfect oval.
Okay.
Yeah. Newton.
Does it have a little
died
basket at the bottom in the center?
Yeah.
With a little,
That's where the
reason,
scrotum goes, right?
Only reason Cracked exists. We're all virgins, and we have to make a website to get our energy out.
As in so many cases, we only hear about a certain segment of the population. In fact, there were more prostitutes per capita in London during the Victorian era than ever before or since. Somebody was them, right? I mean, there was sexuality was rampant, but it was not spoken about. It was not in the 5% of the population that was literate wasn't writing about it, except for a few memoirs that were very juicy and anonymous. But the average people were having sex like crazy, as they generally do. What you find with sexual morality is that it applies to the sort of middle class, the sort of professional class. Everyone below that, they're doing whatever the hell they want, and the upper crust are doing whatever the hell they want. So it's just the sort of normal people who have to follow the rules.
Well, you also talked about how back in the day, masturbation for women was so looked down on that doctors would have to, they called it a disease, and they would just service the woman, but they had to do it in a way that was medical. That was the only way they could get that energy out.
Yeah, they were provoking a nervous paroxysm.
Yeah.
Late 19th century, early 20th century, the number one reason for a woman in England and the US, where these records were being kept, the number one reason for her to go to a doctor was to be treated for hysteria. Difficulty sleeping, moodiness, just basically she wasn't getting any. And so she would go to the doctor, and the doctor would treat her by having her lie on a table, inserting 2 fingers into her vagina, and then with his other hand sort of rubbing her clitoris and doing this thing with his fingers. And there are all these like medical articles in journals describing the process and how to do this. Very serious and learned and blah, blah, and and then he would
The same people, by the way, who would be like, the female orgasm is a myth.
It doesn't exist. Right, exactly. Women don't.
Now let me treat this patient.
Women don't like sex, but they need these treatments, and it was perfect because nobody died. And nobody got better. It's perfect, right? So they just keep coming to the office, and these doctors were like,
yes,
God damn, my elbow hurts.
system.
So
Happy
somebody
Valentine's
was
Day.
like, this is the time of Ford and, the conveyor belts and, all this kind of stuff. So somebody was like, there must be a way to mechanize this thing. And so they started inventing machines that could do this so the doctor could treat a dozen women at once. And so the first ones were like diesel powered,
And just like the coal miners now, there was some guy who was like, my grandfather treated paroxysm. My father treated paroxysm. Now they're bringing in this goddamn robot. Where are all the good vibratory jobs in this country? Thank you.
Bring back handcrafted orgasms.
Artisanal,
right? I think in the 20s, there were more vibrators than toasters in American homes. It was one of the 5 most sold electrical appliances ever. I mean, when electrical appliances began to be sold. So it was all like, oh, my shoulder's a little tight, yeah. That's how vibrators were invented.
And cereal too, right? Cereal was created
To make women come, yeah. Frosted
How do
Flakes,
you
they're
guys
great. The idea was that spicy food excited the sexual response. So you wanted to have young boys particularly eat the blandest food possible, which is why they came up with cornflakes and graham crackers, because if you gave him any sort of spice at all, he'd pop a boner and want to go jerk off. So that's the origin of all these like bland cereal foods and graham crackers as well.
That's why there's so many Asian people, because we like spicy foods.
Checks out.
Probably don't have that much time to go into it, but if you guys are interested, you should check out the book, because I really like all the stuff you talk about, how like society has tried to suppress the idea that women enjoy sex for so long, and you go into how like women generally are the more sexual gender, and it's just so interesting to me, because even now I think like you can't, even in porn, like it tends to be, it's all about male pleasure. And that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, like even the nature of the orgasm is like a clue as to this idea, because the male orgasm tends to come.
It's a myth.
Yeah.
It's a myth, yeah.
Tends to come first, and whereas women take some revving up and then can have multiple orgasms. So why were they built that way if they were supposed to only have one partner who disappointed them every single time they had sex?
Yeah. I'm bisexual, and I like men because I like attention, and I like women because I like to come, so.
So using our Hobbesian imagination, trying to imagine how we got to this world, this version of things where it's strictly monogamous, and that's what we think is natural. Do we just think that people like Kellogg just at some point in the past just sort of wrestled control away from the people who were getting laid and being happy, or how do you imagine that happened?
Was there a media campaign
Right.
to be like, America links sex to
Or
passionate
not even
love
America,
in a monogamous
but
way?
I guess I don't see how the sort of sexist culture follows from agriculture inevitably, So
Right.
decided women had to be property.
So the key is that when hunter-gatherers have no private property, so there's
Right.
no concern with inheritance. Once you have private property, you've got this herd of sheep that you've spent your lifetime, growing. You've got this land that you paid for with your sweat or your father gave to you or whatever. Then it becomes really important, like, who's going to get this when I die? Well, I want my kids to have it.
Oh, okay,
so
got it.
how do I know they're my kids? The only way I can know they're my kids is that I control her behavior totally. So my ownership of her is a part of my ownership of everything else. Also, with the advent of agriculture, you also have domestication of animals. So for the first time, people are very clearly seeing, like, that black bull fucked that white cow, and now we got these black and white calves.
Right.
I get it. I see what happened there.
Right.
So it becomes very clear that one sex act can result in babies.
So science ruined everything. That's what I thought. No, I'm just joking.
I would say private property ruined everything.
Sure. That's it for us, you guys. Give it up for Teresa Lee, Dr. Christopher Ryan, and Michael Swain.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching whatever video that was. Make sure to like it with a button and subscribe to our channel. And normally I do like a bit or like a joke or something like here, but instead, watch out for all these marbles!